Boy, if we look out at the world today, there is a lot of fear swirling around. Globally, it seems fear has taken on a life of its own. There's all this conflict, and it comes from fear. It's part of all of the emotions that build off of fear. And it's part of our life right now. So much has changed, and it's still changing. And change usually brings its own fear, just because it's change. And that unknown feeling in change can be a little scary. And if we watch the news, which I do that on a very limited basis, it overwhelms me at times. But when I watch it, and I've been watching it over time, the fear that was around COVID, it was in our face for 2 years now, and it's still there. But it put us on this roller coaster of fear. It seemed like just as we started to feel less fear around one aspect of COVID, another aspect comes to light, and the fear's right back. And it's not just in our own backyard. We find out things that are happening in the world around COVID, and we start to fear they're going to happen here. And through this time, over two years and probably going forward, it's so obvious that fear feeds on fear. And now we're in the midst of Russia and the Ukraine. And there's so much fear floating around that. When I first heard about the Russian troops poised to invade Ukraine, even before this conflict started, I found myself in fear. My initial reaction was fear. My mind leaped into the past, and I was afraid this would lead to another world war. I don't want to be a part of a world war. I don't want to experience the devastation that happens during world wars. And I got in fear of, I don't know if I have what it takes to stand up to injustice and do the heroic acts that people did during those wars. All of this was floating around in my head, and I started to go down into this rabbit hole, thinking about the what ifs and bringing in this fear. And then all of a sudden, I caught myself. I realized I was projecting the future based on what happened in the past, feeling fear for what could happen because of what did happen. I mean, hello, science of mind teaching principle is not bound by precedent. There is no law that says what happened in the past will happen in the future. And that let me step out of that false fear. It was all made up in my mind, and realized, even though things are happening that bring up fear that we don't want to happen, we're always at choice. And this is the choice we have around what's happening over in the Ukraine. We can't stay in fear. When we're in fear, we're feeding that action. We're sending energy there, which perpetuates what's happening. We've got to remember that this is a choice, and we can step out of fear, step back into compassion and love and what we want to happen. And when I bring up the world fear, I just wanted to show how easy it is to get caught up in the happenings of the world and feel fear. Looking outside ourselves, we see everything is separate, and we can begin to feel at the mercy of effects. And it's up to us to remember that they're just effects, and that the power is in remembering that we're all one and bringing it into our own awareness. You know, we're all unique expressions of the one. I'm a unique expression, and I'm connected with everyone and co-creating this world. I may not be able to go over there and stop that conflict. I know that I can't change it by resisting it and condemning it. I can only feel the power within me and affect how I feel, and replace that fear with power and this feeling of love and remembering what I want, having compassion for those involved. And we can't choose who we have compassion for. It's all of them or none of them. Compassion is for everyone. We're all connected. So we've got to spread that around to those that are aggressing and those that are at the mercy of that aggression. And I look at it, I go, where love is, fear is not. So if we want things to be different, it starts with our own consciousness. I mean, we can only create change from within ourselves. And I know it sounds cliche, but we have to be the change, excuse me, we want to see. We have to recognize our own fears that are within us and start there. Release those fears within it so there's nothing to build on that energy. And fear can be complicated. It can be sneaky. It can show up in false beliefs about who we are. It can show up as recklessness, which we may think is courage. And I think a lot of fear is behind behaviors and beliefs that we've incorporated in our life, not even realizing it's fear. I mean, we can see a behavior as protective or sensible and not even realize that the underlying behavior is because we're afraid of stepping out. I mean, I had to think about it a lot, and it took me a while to realize that the false beliefs that I've created, they were created from fear, and then they perpetuated that fear. The most common one that I have, and I've heard it over and over from other people, is that I'm not enough. And it goes, I'm not good enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not smart enough. The list goes on and on. We make it specific, but the bottom thing is I'm not good enough. And I think that causes a lot of fear. And once we recognize this belief and other beliefs that have been built on fear, we've taken the first step to letting go of that belief and that underlying fear. Because really, any belief that puts us in a negative light, that makes us think less of ourselves, that we're feeling bad or angry or less than, it's caused by fear, and it's a cause of fear. These beliefs show up in bigger fears, the fear of being abandoned or of making mistakes and being ridiculed, or not being worthy of love. All these things, these fears that come up, they can paralyze us and cause us to lash out. And when we live in these beliefs and in this fear, we feel insecure. And then we project these fears and insecurities out into the world. And that attracts experiences and people that reflect these beliefs back to us in the way they show up, in the way they treat us. And sometimes they show up to show us what we don't want to see. We won't don't want to admit that some of these things are in ourselves. And I think that this impacts us to a greater or lesser degree, depending on how much or how little we may love ourselves. So how do we get rid of these fears? I mean, there's all kinds of techniques to change our beliefs and remove these fears. The affirmations, talking with someone, getting to the core belief and rewriting it. Some people just ignore them and ignore the fear and just go and do it. Other ways are just focus on what our strengths are, our competencies, go into spiritual meditation, avoid the fear, or just push through it and move on. And they're all ways that we've created to deal with fear, but the best way to let go of the fear and to live with it is to love it to death. Because love is the ultimate fear buster. And I know that people, I see this in areas where they think fear is a good motivator and they think that it's a good thing to use. It's more powerful. But I kind of like to spend a few moments comparing fear and love before I talk more about love, because we have to be aware of these major differences. And these comparisons that I found were in an article by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And so, first off, love and fear, they're opposites. Love breeds positive emotions like joy and peace and satisfaction. And fear breeds those negative emotions, anger and guilt and sadness. So they're opposites. Love opens us up to life, where fear holds us back. In love, we want to expand our life. In fear, we're contracting, afraid to move forward. Fear destroys and love creates. A lot of times when we're afraid of something, we're more likely to tear it down or throw it away. And when we come from a place of love, we feel more encouraged to create and build and add. So it's kind of, they're at odds. Fear destroys and love creates. Fear tightens and love releases. If you're afraid of losing something or someone, you might tighten your grip on it, hold on for dear life. But if you truly love it, you're willing to let it go, let it explore who or what it is. There's no fear in there. You're just letting it. That's saying, if you love something, let it go. If it loves you, it'll come back. That's being in a place of love. Fear would tighten down and hold on tight. And fear breeds domination and love breeds cooperation. When someone is afraid of losing control, they can become very domineering. It's like the louder my voice, the more powerful I am, the more control I have. But love, when we're in that place of love, we don't feel that need to control and be in control of everything. We want to cooperate. We want to bring in what everyone has to offer. And then there's hesitation. Fear hesitates and love acts. So fear can keep us from doing things we really want to do. And hold us back, same as the hesitation. But love, it pushes us towards our goal. It causes us to act, to make our dreams a reality. I remember I really wanted to go skydiving, but it's pretty scary to think about jumping out of an airplane. And I just am so glad that I love myself enough to let myself jump out of an airplane, because it was the best. If I'd have let that fear, I would have I would have missed out on something really fun and freeing. Another thing love does is it moves you toward something you want. I think this is really important. Love moves you toward what you want. Fear moves you away from something you don't want. It's our focus. When you're in love, you're focusing on what you want. When you're in fear, you're trying to move away from something you don't want, and you're focusing on what you don't want. And we know that where our focus is, that's what we create. So love is a much better place to do. I want to focus on what I want. And what's really important, I think that's the crux of a lot of this, is love and fear cannot coexist. If we're in fear, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, if we're in fear, we are not in a place of love. When we're in a place of love, we cannot be in a place of fear. Can you think of a time when you've been in both love and fear? It's impossible. I tried to think of that, and I couldn't really bring those two emotions together in one moment. And when you can't feel both love and fear at the same time, you get to actively choose which one you want to experience. To me, fear just seems to make life harder and heavier. And love gives us a lightness and more happiness. And I think if we're aware of this difference and how these two impact our world, I think most of us are going to choose love in a heartbeat. It's just such a powerful emotion. It's the nature of the universe. It's the power and presence of God. It is God. And since we are expressions of God, it's who we are. So it's the most natural place to be. Anything outside of love is going to require effort. In the Science of Mind text, Ernest Holmes writes, love is at the center of man's being, and the calm, continuous pulsations of life are governed by love. And he also writes, love overcomes everything and neutralizes all that is unlike itself. Love is God. So when we're in alignment with God, with love, there's no fear because there's no place for fear. Love overcomes and neutralizes everything that's not like itself. And in God, there's only love. Haven't you felt it when you've been in this place and you're bringing in love and it just feels good in your body? I've sat down before and I've tuned in to feel love and alignment with God, and there's this peace and calm that descends over me. My whole body relaxes. I automatically smile. And I recognize everything's in divine order and I feel safe and loved. I can feel the energy shift around me every time I focus on God. It's one of the joys of science, of spiritual mind treatment, because the first step is connecting with God. Every time I step into that first step, there's this peace and presence that fills me. And I feel this state of self-love and self-acceptance when this happens. Because I know when I'm out of alignment and not happy with myself, condemning myself or blaming myself, whatever's going on in my life, I have a difficult time making this connection. But when I align with God's presence, I feel it within me. It's not that that's the only time God's there, because God's love is always there for us. It's when we open up to that love and allow it in by loving ourselves, by feeling that love, then we feel more of God's love. We recognize that presence that's always there. Like attracts like. When we open to that love, there's God. And it really begins with self-love. Because when we love ourselves, we're in alignment with God's love. We're recognizing who we are. We're recognizing ourselves as expressions of God. And all of that love becomes larger in our life. God makes it, we've made it more available to ourselves because we've aligned with it. And when we don't love ourselves, we can't fully accept God's love. That's when we start living in fear and we feel insecure and our minds start making up things. And sometimes it's pretty scary stuff. And that fear starts to take over. But as soon as we make the choice to love, that fear begins to dissipate. That love that is always around us grows and takes its place. It has to, because fear and love cannot occupy that same space. The thoughts and feelings of love and fear can't coexist. And I know that love is the power of God. Fear is the power of the ego. And I want the power of God in my life all the time. I want to believe in love in the world. I want to know that this is where people are. This is what I want to see in people. And it starts by seeing it in myself. I know that I can learn to love myself more by releasing the fear, releasing the old stories, releasing those beliefs that started with fear. And every one of us can do that. We can look at our beliefs and let them go. Let all those fear-based beliefs that we build up, let them go. And as we do that, we're opening that space in our hearts for more love. That love rushes in and fills it. And living in love, it's that inner path of well-being. Now, I know I don't want to live in fear and I'm going to choose love, but I know fear is going to come up. Because, I mean, we live in a crazy world. And when I'm looking out there, sometimes I can forget that I am love. I can forget to love, and I can catch on to all of that fear power that's coming outside of me. But once I step back and I recognize love, I can see those fears as separate, but I can also see them as catalysts for growth and expansion. Because when I face those fears and embrace the love of God, embrace that love within me, I can move beyond those fears and bring transformation, first within me, and then it ripples out into the world. We're all connected. The more love we bring out, the less room there is for fear. And we can find within ourselves this deeper revelation of love and understanding of the abundance of love of the universe. And then when life happens, we can step back into that place of love and trust in God to see us through. The Course in Miracles says, only the love of God will protect you in all circumstances. It will lift you out of every trial and raise you high above all the perceived dangers of this world into a climate of perfect peace and safety. It will transport you into a state of mind which nothing can threaten, nothing can disturb, and nothing can intrude upon. The eternal calm of God. When I think about this, I'm not afraid of being afraid. I know it sounds crazy, but I think unchecked fear builds on itself. But when I know God is there for me, love is always there for me, I know I won't spiral into fear. God will inspire me, a voice will come and I'll catch myself and I'll let go of that fear. There's another quote in the Course of Miracles that is in the same line, and it's, put all your faith in the love of God within you, eternal, changing, changeless, and forever unfailing. This is the answer to whatever confronts you today. That's so true. If we have faith in the love of God, that love within us, the moment we realize we're in the midst of fear, we can let it go. We don't have to struggle or try to get away from the fear. We can just relax and declare the truth. Wherever I am, God is. There's only love because God is love, and fear is an illusion. Remembering the truth that we are love will set us free from that illusion of fear. So love, recognizing love, stepping into that power of love is the ultimate fear buster. It's that gift of God to let go of all these things the ego's built up to keep that separation there. Love brings us back into that oneness, that alignment with God, that place where we live when we are in our true being. So I want to close with one last quote, and it's from Sophocles. So this has been a truth that's been here for a long time. And Sophocles says, one word frees us of all the weight and pain of life. That word is love. That word is love. Love is so powerful that fear doesn't have a chance when we remember that one word, love. So I encourage you, put your faith in love. That's where our power is. That's where God is in us. Thank you.